from that list of 12 to 15, I draw my
So he's saying initially, I know it says 12 to 15, and we only just read off what is it now, 6? He's had up to 15, like, as he's been refining his facts, but for the book, he settled on 6. So that's why he's talking about 12 to 15 now. And no, I didn't start partway through. This is from Gary's actual channel, and it's Gary speaking.
latest number. I've used as few as 3. Once in a while, I've used 1. You said, well, if your next question is like, what are they? I'd say, take me 1 minute. Jesus died by crucifixion, number 1. Number 2,
Okay, so number 1 is Jesus died by crucifixion. Let's talk about number 1 for a second. When I'm thinking about this, and we talked about it yesterday, I'm thinking every single one, I'm thinking, how does this support a resurrection?
mhm.
And somebody dying doesn't seem like a fact that supports a resurrection.
It may not
It's mundane. Go ahead.
It may not support it, but it is a prerequisite.
Sure.
You can't come back from the dead if you're not dead. So it's sort of an establishing, and as we've discussed a little bit, I won't bring what I've come to learn
Mm,
is that there is a Muslim apologetic. The Quran basically says that Jesus didn't actually die on the cross. He was taken down while still alive and then just carried on, being a prophet. And so this first fact isn't for the atheists necessarily in the crowd, though it is definitely a shot at the bow. If you're a mythicist, it is a fact, I suppose, that you wouldn't necessarily jump on board with either.
I mean, yeah, I guess you kind of have to exist to die, so that's valid, I suppose.
So, but no, you're right. In no way does it lend to a resurrection case per se, other than to say that it's a prerequisite.
Well, I mean, ostensibly, each of these individual this is the way I'm looking at it. Each of these individual facts and them together as an aggregate are intended to support the resurrection of Jesus. So when
Right.
you look at them as a whole, it's each fact is supposed to be an individual piece of evidence. That one I'll just grant because I'll grant that he existed, that he was alive and he died. Are we fair granting that one? That Jesus exists? You and me,
As far
we
as
should
I
have a
know,
tally system.
everyone born in the first century is dead, as to the best of my knowledge.
So far as you that would be the bigger miracle though, eh?
Right.
Some guy was
So,
like, I was born in 1.
yeah.
I knew
So
Jesus. Okay.
this seems to be a pretty easy grant for me. Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, fair enough. So now we're gonna move to 2.
his disciples had experiences that they thought were appearances of the risen Jesus. 3,
Okay. So he's going through them quickly, but this was that the disciples had experiences that they thought were of the risen Jesus. Now, I think this is the one where we're gonna have the most to say. I'll let you go first.
Are we just getting right into? We're just getting right into it.
I think so, yeah, like, I don't see
Okay,
another like
fair enough. So I think anyone who's watched my channel before will have heard me talk at some point about something that I'm now calling my minimal witnesses theory. And my minimal witness theory is that Gary's facts, these minimal facts, are entirely supported by only 2 people actually having an appearance of risen Jesus. Now, this first fact, Gary wants to say that the disciples had experiences that they thought were actually appearances of risen Jesus. The trouble is that when Gary goes to write his lengthy chapter to defend this point, the only ones he really gives defense for are 3, maybe 4. So he really gives a defense for James, the brother of Jesus, for Paul, for Peter, and maybe John. John, he doesn't we don't have a he didn't die as a martyr. Even Christians don't think he died as a martyr, and we don't really know what he thought if you don't grant that he wrote the gospels. John's pretty loose, and Gary doesn't want to even hang his hat on notes. So the 3 he wants to hang his hat on are Peter, Paul, and James. Now, those of you who are astute and remember the facts that were listed, fact number 5 and 6 were Paul and James. So they're already covered, James and Paul. So when it comes to fact number 2, the only person that Gary's really defending here is Peter. And so in my view, the fact should really say Peter reported experiences that he thought was the appearance of the risen
yeah.
Jesus, and not this conflation of adding James and Paul into the disciple group when they aren't the 12 for sure. And if you want to call them disciples, why are you giving them separate facts? So uh, that's enough for my rant. What did you want to add with that?
Yeah, no, so I'm gonna say functionally the same thing. I'm pointing at my with my mouse like other people can see. I know they can't, but I'm gonna say functionally the same thing, maybe worded differently. I'm not sure if I have new content to add, but when we were going over this and like listening to videos and you were listening to the book and we were discussing things about it, I got immediately kind of annoyed because I asked in the book, right? Like I said, okay, well, this is his fact. I know that this is his fact. In his book, since he uses disciples and he uses them and he uses plurals to describe more than one person having a verified historical experience, what evidence does he put forth for anybody else outside of Peter that was a disciple? Because here's the conflation in language that's consistently being used. And I think this is an important point. They're calling and I don't care if they do this, but you need to be really, really clear, like, just generally, I don't care if they do this. Like, they're calling James and Paul also disciples, so they're looping them in with the 12 people that people would think about when they're thinking about the disciples, right?
Yep.
Which fine, if you're gonna do that, whatever, but do it consistently, like, have a consistent application. Because if you're saying the disciples as a group and you want to be able to say the disciples as a group, you should have evidence for more than just one that you're willing to hang your hat on. And the way he gets around that so that he can still use plurals, as though he's talking about more than one person he's certain about, is he takes facts 5 and 6 and jams them up in fact 2 with Peter. So that if somebody says, well, really, you're only presenting evidence for Peter, maybe John. Even you say maybe John. You won't even give some certainty about John. The only one they'll give some certainty about is Peter. So really that fact should just say Peter believed he saw the risen Jesus. That's all that should say. But he wants to still be able to say disciples plural. So he takes James, the brother of Jesus, who wasn't one of the 12, and Paul, who wasn't one of the 12, and says, "Oh, well, when I say the disciples, I'm talking about them too." Well, if you're talking about them too in item 2, then there is no 5 and there is no 6 because you already covered them in 2. The end. Like, why do you have 5 and 6 then? You covered them in 2. It's like you're artificially inflating your facts.